Hey everyone, welcome back to the Cause Correct podcast with me, Rispa Wanjanjake. I know it's been more than a minute. I think it's been about at least 10 days since I released the last podcast, and given how much I think I used to release a lot of back to back content when I started, it might have felt a bit disappointing or as if there wasn't clarity on how the frequency of these podcasts episodes are is going to look like. I promise you that I'm working very hard to find a perfect rhythm. There's been a bit of a change of schedule on my end, and just also a lot of growth as well. And I think a lot of being positively humbled by life, which I would actually truly love to share with you guys. In this podcast episode, we are going to look at what are the myths that we have about change or cause correction that we must dispel, that we must forget, you know? And I think I would like to start by saying that the lessons I'm going to share under this podcast, of which once again the topic is myths about change slash cause correction that we must overcome, that we must get over. Um, I think I have read versions of some of the lessons that I'm about to share here, but I think there is nothing more real than your own lived experience to some of these things. I think it's impossible to truly walk that path that says that only a fool makes their own mistakes where others have made them and, learned from them. There could be a truth in that statement, but honestly, I think now more than ever, everyone has to walk their own journey of learning these lessons. One of the very first lessons that is a myth, or it's a feeling we always have in our minds, but honestly, we just must forget if we are going to cause correct effectively. The first one is that cause correction or your change or your transformation is an event. Okay. So I know that a lot of us, both in Kenya and I think even globally, have education systems that really insist on single events. It's you go to campus, for example, for 4 years, 5 years, 6 years, depending on what you're studying. And it feels as if the biggest moment of that entire journey is when you have your graduation. It's like for those of us that have done an 844 system of schooling, it's you go through primary school or yeah, you go through primary school for about 8 years, and all that seems to matter is your final examination, the national examination, and the results that you get in that. So I think personally, I have carried that mentality for a very long period of time, so that every single time I needed to commit to a process, I honestly just didn't know how to commit to a process because the only thing that makes sense in my mind is something that has an event, something that culminates to a big event. But you see, the moment we are out of school, the moment you are out of school, life is no longer a series of events like high school or primary school or campus or master's degrees. Like at some point, this sort of nationally or globally competitive experiences and moments are going to come to an end. So, where there's no longer single moments to measure whether I am succeeding or not, whether we are succeeding or not. I think many of us have not learned how to deal with it, and so we get lost a bit. I must confess, I think I've been the most lost person I have known. I don't even know if I would say I'm found, but for lack of a better quote, let me quote this show where someone said that I don't think that I am fully found, but I am not as lost as I used to be. That just sounds deep. But yes, so I was saying that when we have been used to life being measured in this long processes that culminate to one process, um, the moment we get out of that school system, that campus system, I think it's a bit harder than we like to admit to find our footing. Some people are very lucky that they just settled into life, or they had developed their maturity and their decision making, such that they didn't or they haven't had to spend a lot of their early 20s or mid 20s in the process of trying to find themselves again. But in my case, I can only speak for myself because I can only speak for my own course correction journey. I think mine has been a lot of going through what feels like through, like going round in circles. Um, Primarily, I think that was contributed to by the fact that I have been subject to self sabotaging a lot, so that there is no place of building momentum, or rather, like, there's no place of building on the momentum that you have picked. It's like you make some efforts and then you sabotage all of that. So it feels like coming to start all over again. I'm only hoping that the lessons that I'm picking and the stillness that I'm learning to cultivate in this season will help me to now build up on my efforts and not keep, or rather not keep sabotaging them. I cannot use that language. I cannot afford to do that anymore. But for a lot of us, I think this can be an encouragement for someone. To be honest, the journey of your discovering who you are is going to look a bit different, perhaps, from somebody else who has had their own journey. It's from your upbringing, it's from how fast you learn, it's also who you're walking with. I think I would say that one of the bigger differences in my journey now is that I feel that I have a lot of help. And it's not just a feeling. I know that I have a lot of help, and the help is not even necessarily from people, because I've always had good people in my life. I've had life coaches, I tried therapy here and there. But I think that not even therapy can help anyone who's not ready to be helped by therapy. Not even having a life coach can help someone whose mind has not matured to the point of learning why they need that. But anyway, just to wrap this point up, because correction is not going to be an event. So, for someone who's out here and they're still looking for a way to make their life eventful, so you want to have that one big moment that keeps confirming to people, or that keep giving you an opportunity to prove to people that you are still there and you're still doing well. I think you might need to change your mind, just because I realize that life is not going to look like that. As we get older, it's going to be about more of maturity, being able to hold ourselves accountable even without big events to either mark progress or failure. It's going to be it's going to be about using completely different metrics to measure whether we are succeeding or not. So that's the first myth you must get over. Life is not going to feel like campus where you have 4 years and then a graduation to mark it. We won't have graduation. We won't have celebrations and things that marks a success like that. It's not going to be there. We have to therefore learn to find ways of living and building ourselves that do not rely on any external events to validate us. The second point I would like to share is that there is such a thing as you need time to develop. Let me explain that. So I've always been rather a very headfast kind of person, that I get an idea and I want to jump into it immediately. And I think a lot of people generally are like that, or or I have just been a person who always dove very headfast into things, but that's the kind of person I have been. Honestly, even to keep secrets on things that, you probably need to let marinate in your head for some time for you to figure out what they look like, what the strategy for executing them is going to look like. I've never allowed myself, like for a lot of my life, I'd not really allowed myself to be taking time for things to marinate. And therefore, it's you jump head first. Oh, I've gotten an idea what my purpose is. And I think that the full glory of me walking in purpose is going to be the next 2 days or the next 3 days. I mean, I think honestly, there is a difference between optimism and foolishness, for lack of a better word. I think the Bible is, and even not even just the Bible alone, a lot of people have taught this. Take time to develop, refine yourself, manage your expectations based on the fact that you knowing what your purpose might be or what it might look like doesn't mean that you are ready for it. So being a very headfirst kind of person, I think my early 20s and my late teens felt quite disappointing because my expectation to see what I think me walking in purpose looks like were very high, and I didn't want to take the process or to be submitted to the process of growing into that purpose. You know, I really am avoiding giving an example, but I will give one now that I have said it. You see, for example, you could know that eventually you're going to do some work around food and agriculture in Africa, as an example. I don't think that's for me, so I can use that as an example. And it's easy to feel like the first project that you start where you're farming on half an acre is what is going to transform the way food security is handled in Africa. But the truth is that by the time you will be becoming someone who can feed an entire, for example, county or state or continent or nation, you need knowledge, you need experience, you need networks, you need to understand the market, you need to understand the science of growing food. You need to take time to even develop relationships that enable you to get that kind of land. Because also, no matter how good of a scientist you are, you couldn't possibly grow food for an entire world population on a half acre, as an example. There is a sense of there has to be a reality to things. So, if, for example, you want to be a prophet, okay, let me use an example of some of the people that I admire. I hear someone like Apostle Joshua Selman. So he's someone, for those who don't know who that is. So it's this I would say he's a man of God, he's an apostle, and he is a teacher. He's actually more of a teacher of the word who's also very involved in the process of transformation in Africa. And he says that they started their church with maybe 15 people, and these 15 people would be the praise and worship team. They are the ushers, they are also the congregation. And that was some time back. It took years. And now all of a sudden, it's like the moment people start knowing who he is, it feels like he has blown up overnight. But essentially, no, it has not been overnight. But anyway, the way he explains part of his process is that he says that we should even thank God and see that it is God's mercy when He does not allow us to walk into the fullness of what our purposes, our mandate in life look like in their full glory before we have developed, because we would crash under the weight of what the responsibilities are, or we would crash under all the attention that we get, and we start thinking that it's about us instead of the people that we are supposed to serve, instead of the fact that it is God's calling, it is His people. So you are going to serve God there. And I know that I've really tried to avoid talking about um the course correction process as something that involves God. I think I've always had this thing where I want to sound appropriate for a larger audience, and therefore if I sound like I don't talk about God, maybe it's going to be more people or create room for more people. But here's the thing though, this is part of my course correction. I have always loved God, but I think at some point, once again, because of not having full development, I think there's a few encounters I had that I would say caused me to feel ashamed of my faith, to feel ashamed of the gospel, which is very counterproductive for someone like me whose life and purposes are very tied to that relationship with God, you know. So I would want to encourage anyone who also feels like, I don't know, you want to sound okay for a bigger audience or whatever. Honestly, just take it to God in prayer, because at the end of the day, especially if you're going to be serving God's purposes, you can't serve God's purposes and you do not want to talk about God, so that you do not seem uncool. You know, the person that, like, how I got to feeling ashamed of the gospel was someone who told me, oh, I don't understand how an intelligent person like you would believe in there being a supreme being who apparently controls everything. At the time, feeling like I belonged in a certain community, or just feeling, wanting to feel like I belonged, was very important, because um in some twisted beliefs I had felt for a very long time, rather, as if I didn't belong anywhere, as if I didn't have any kind of comfort with either God or people. So I was always looking for a place to belong. So I would use the metrics of the earth to determine, who's cool enough, where do I want to belong, then sort of try to twist myself to fit into that community. So when I came across these people who, well, a lot of their life is right, you know, in terms of a lot of what I would have wanted to be at the time, but they didn't believe in God, it made me feel stupid and a bit as if I was just being so uncool to be someone who says that they believe in Jesus Christ, you know. But anyway, once again, this is why we must insist that change is not going to be a moment. It's not going to be like 844 school systems. It's not a moment. It's something that is going to take time. And as a result, then we must give ourselves room. We cannot just jump immediately just because we have an idea of what our life purpose could be, just because we think we know exactly what our lives are about. You have a long way to go. I used to think it's a joke when I read things like, you guys don't understand that, like David, for example, in the Bible was anointed as king when he was 14, but it's not until when he was about 33 years old that he became king. So technically, our like 17 years, is it 17 years? Whatever, math. It was like 17 years between when he was anointed for the purpose and when he took it up. I don't have to repeat that. I think many people have said it, but I've just seen it for myself. Honestly, I would encourage you, if you're someone who feels like you are at the threshold of, you've just discovered what your life is about and you know what your purpose is, oh my, press on even longer. Like, let that idea sit with you. Let that revelation, like, for I can use that word, let it sit with you long enough until you understand. So why you, where are you going, how is it going to look like, and how is it going to start? I mean, there's a time I left a job immediately after getting an idea of what my life purpose could be. And I mean, it was okay to pursue purpose, but like, you do not have a way to earn a living. You have no way to pay your bills. I mean, as much as we want to be optimistic and we want to serve God, God has never been a God of disorder. No. And He cannot be the God who subjects some people to process, to mature them up for the responsibility that He's calling them to. But you somehow, you are going to be the exception, that you don't have to go through any process. You can step into your purpose immediately when you're still dysfunctional, when you still probably have a few immaturity problems, that need to be sort of cut off and pruned until you are a properly more mature and more reliable person whose mind is more stable. It's not someone who's unsteady. And I think actually I'll press on this point, then I will do a part two of this whole thing of jumping headfirst. I think is very close to me because I've done it many times. And if I compare with articles that we read online, it does seem to be a common trend among very many young people, especially Gen Zs. I am a Gen Z. I'm just slightly on the older, like earlier pioneers of Gen Z. I don't know. 97. I think Gen Z starts at 95 or 2000, whichever. But we are very head first kind of people. But the truth is that we are not exempted from life. We're not exempted from going through the process of maturing up, learning to be reliable. Currently, I'm reading this book that was talking about telling where you are at in your growth stage, and it's talking about babyhood and childhood. So it was describing that when someone is a baby, they have to be watched over. It's not even because it's their fault, it's just that they are a baby. A baby cannot feed itself. A baby cannot take care of itself. A baby cannot change itself. A baby eats everything that a baby sees. Just the first instinct is to take that food to their mouth. Babies are innocent and they are completely reliant on other people. Even if you have sensed what your purpose could be in life, and yet you cannot lead yourself as an example, like without someone watching over you and following you up to make sure that you do things. You do have a good purpose, you do have promise and potential, but you are not ready for purpose. This is me saying that as if it were to someone out there, but these are words I realize I just refused to hear when a few people in my life, okay, not a few, it's just like, yeah, it's those few people that God puts in your life who teach you this kind of things. But I think I was more hungry really to prove myself to people. I think the problem was how much I wanted praise for myself, or maybe not praise for myself, it's how much I hadn't grown into the maturity of knowing that I was enough. I didn't have to keep trying to prove myself before people to feel as if I had become someone or something. There's a paradox, there's many reasons why we want to jump into the glory of things, but the truth is that if we jump fast, we are also going to crash fast. You're going to be like a bird that flew, and the moment it runs out of fuel, it crashes immediately. And the crash is so terrible. By the time you need to get yourself up, every bone is broken. You literally have to be like put together, like a pot and little pieces being put together all over again. There is value to patience. There is a need to not jump so fast into things. These are part of the myths that we have. It feels like it's good. You might even feel like, oh, time is running out. Time is not running out. The question we should ask ourselves is, why do we feel we have to do it so fast and so immediately? What are we hoping we're going to get by doing things so fast and so immediately? Is the goal to serve people, or is the goal to serve self? In my case, I have come to find out it was self. I wanted to serve myself. I wanted to be the one who is seen as someone or something or some kind of way. And if we're still in a place where it's praise for ourselves that we are looking for, then we're not mature enough. We're not ready to take up any big responsibilities, because a lot of where we are going, it will have very little to do with us. It will have to do with serving others and pouring ourselves out for others. So I'm going to end this particular episode here. And for recap, we have said that myths that we should dispel, that we must dispel about walking into purpose slash cause correction slash how change or transformation takes place is one, that it's a moment. Life is not going to be about moments like we've had with 844 or like with the school systems. We will have to be mature enough to hold ourselves accountable and measure our successes without there being, moments of being big accolades to mark that change. Secondly, even if we discover and we sense what our purpose in life could be, there is a need to grow into people who are worthy of the attention that we will command eventually when we are walking in the fullness of the purposes that we've been called into. So do not jump head first. You jump too fast, you crash hard as well. So I hope that this helps. I am hoping that sharing my journey with you is going to be of help to someone. This is where we're going to end this particular episode. I will now upload another one that has still in line with the same lessons around myths that we have to give up, that we must dispel, that we must get out of our minds as we walk into purpose, as we course correct. Alright? So that's it. With all my love, Rispa Wanjanjake, and see you guys in